Welcome to the Cardboard Herald, my chance to talk to game creators and creative gamers. Normally, you'd be hearing your host, Jack Eddy, but not today. Today is the 100th episode, and my name is Josh Simons, and I will be doing the interviewing of Jack Eddy as our creative gamer today. Jack, how are you doing, man?
This is awesome. I'm doing great. I'm fresh off of work, and I'm excited to get a chance to hang out with you and actually talk to you and be experiencing the other end of the Cardboard Heraldness.
Yeah, well, man, it's thanks for having me on and having me do this for you. So I was thinking back as I was preparing for this interview, thinking back on my first encounter with the Cardboard Herald. The best I could remember, and I don't know where I saw it first, but it was hashtag old games, new homes. And I was like, I've got to try to win this copy of Boss Monster.
Yep, yeah.
And then I think the first episode I came in was with Greg Spence from the Broken Token.
Oh, man. I've been thinking about that episode recently.
That's kind of where I came in. But one of the questions I've got is, like, tell me about the genesis of the Cardboard Herald. Like, where did it start as either your idea or an idea that your wife or someone else said, hey, you should think about doing this?
Yeah, so I think some of the lore has come out in broken bits and pieces, but the main thing is that there were kind of a series of events all at once. So first off was for all of my life, I've been a really, I think, creative person. Someone who at least likes creating things. I won't take the credit of inherently being a very creative person. That's for other people to judge. But, and I've always looked for creative output. And I had been doing music for the majority of my life as the primary creative thing. And I had recently had two events happen where the band that I was playing with most consistently here in Juneau, we kind of split up because two of the guys in the band worked together and their job took them out of country. And I was like, oh man, well, I guess we are going to say sayonara to that. And then I was also having a baby at the same time, which made it so just banging around as loud as possible on my drums wasn't exactly going to be the creative outlet that I was needing. Then probably the more serious thing is that one of my oldest friends, in fact, my oldest friend, he's my friend since fourth grade, Peter, he was getting very sick, and ultimately he passed away, but he was a very talented writer, and he would often bounce his writing off of me, and he would encourage me to write as well, and I never really took the plunge on writing. And then I was reflecting on a lot of stuff, and I was like, man, I really should try writing. I have opinions about things. I think I have a sense of humor. I think I have a voice. Why don't I try writing? And I decided I will start doing just written reviews of games to jump into the world of writing, trying to be really critical of these reviews. And then I would make this podcast that was just more so my own audio diary. It was going to be like 10 to 20 minute episodes, which if you know anything about the way that I talk, that's preposterous to imagine me talking for only 10 to 20 minutes at a time. But it was meant to be something where I could just chronicle the experience of trying to write. And in retrospect, it sounds like the worst thing in the world. Just someone talking into a microphone like, yeah, that Caverna review was all right, but I guess it got better, and here's what I did about it, and, you know, here's what I could do, et cetera, et cetera. And I kind of evolved that original concept into what's TCbH reviews now, with the actual review accompanying it. And yeah, so I just started doing that. And then what really evolved it into the interview platform was I had a buddy who was into making print and play games, Mike Hyman, and he had published a few of those. And so I was like, I don't know, why don't I do an interview with you? I listen to a lot of podcasts and they occasionally do interviews. Why not? So I did an interview with him, and through his print and play connections, he knew Patrick Leader of Leader Games, and he was like, you know what, why don't I connect you with him? And then I was like, oh, well, now I've done 2 interviews. I guess I'm an interview podcast now. And that's the rest is history.
And you just kept rolling,
Yep.
taking those chances and saying, hey, man, I wonder if this person would talk to me.
Yeah, because it turns out if you've interviewed even a print and play designer, then you can tell other people I've interviewed designers. And then when you've interviewed 2, you can be like, now I've interviewed notable designers. And, you don't have to elaborate on that too much. And that's enough to get you in the door.
Yeah, that sounds good, man. And being in touch with all those designers, like you've been part of the gaming community that is more than just a consumer. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the aspects of the gaming community and, just the hobby of gaming in general that you find the most fascinating?
As far as the community goes, like specific to, in general, community, consumers, creators, everyone, it's a very welcoming and supportive community. And that's not always something that people associate with gaming, especially like video gaming. And, you get on Xbox Live or something and you're like, oh, better mute this. But like consistently, I've just met people who are so full of positivity and want to help one another. It is a very competitive industry in the sense that everyone's trying to get their games published and there's only so many publishers out there, but it doesn't have a lot of ill will. And so many people are willing to give feedback to work on an even playing field. The highest echelon of game designers are still willing to talk with podcasters and talk with other game designers and talk with other, new publishers about just what makes games awesome and how do you get people to get to the table. And it's really this uplifting industry that I think is still kind of burgeoning out of the supposed golden age of board games, where it's young enough that everyone kind of knows everyone else. And if they don't know someone, they at least know someone who knows someone. And that positivity and the kind of reinforcement of, you make your creative thing and someone will be the audience for it. Like that's so uplifting. And that's the most amazing thing to me, because through music, through video games, through any number of other creative communities that I've been a part of, and even non-creative communities I've been a part of, there's just a lot of people who want to feel good by making other people feel insecure. Whether like the best way I can put it is like you go into a music shop and you're like, hey man, I want some D'Addario 10s for my Stratocaster, and they're going to be like, oh, you play Stratocasters? You play Fenders? Okay, let me know when you want like a real instrument. Not that that's everyone, but there's like a 25% chance that you're going to run into that person. And that's same thing could be true if you're going into like a hunting shop and you're like,
sure,
I need this type of ammo, and they're like, oh, okay, you're looking for the baby ammo, call us when you're in for like big boy guns, that kind of stuff. And I don't really feel that in the creative aspect of this community, which I really dig.
You're not really hearing a whole lot of, well, no true Scotsman would play Carcassonne.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was thinking about that today, that's one of those games like I've never played Carcassonne.
What? Never played Carcassonne. You gotta rectify that, man. I mean, it's so easy to just like bust that out. I mean, by today's standards, it's certainly not the most dynamic game, but I mean, a good episode of Doctor Who and some Carcassonne, man, that's a way to live.
Yeah, well, now you're digging into another one of my things, because I've never seen Doctor Who either.
Well, you know what? It's a wide world out there. Forget the Doctor Who, and let's just put on a nice album. Let's put on Neil Young's Harvest, and then you're going to sit there and listen to that and play some Carcassonne, and that's a good evening. Yeah.
Well, speaking of albums, I've been enjoying the Rookin' records you put out. So I saw that you've had those on Token Punch Lunch with Dice Tower too. That's right.
Yeah.
So how did that come about?
Oh man. So I think it was actually like one of those Twitter Follow Friday things. I got lumped into something with Sam Healy, and I think someone was making some reference to Blood Rage. And I mentioned in that, like, represent Southeast Alaska or something, because I had shot the Blood Rage Rookin' record in front of the Mendenhall Glacier here in Southeast. And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to put this video up there and be like, here's the appropriate thing to listen to while playing Blood Rage and the appropriate place to talk about it, because it totally looks like Vikings would be here. Granted, it's Alaska and not, Greenland or something, but, still, it at least looks picturesque enough in the way that people identify, say New Zealand as Middle Earth. This is close enough. And Sam Healy just messaged me after that and said, hey, man, would you ever be interested in contributing to the Dice Tower? And I was like, oh, my God. Sam Healy's talking to me about this.
Right.
And I've been doing it since, much to the pleasure of like 1/10 of the audience of that video series and much to the disappointment of 90% of it. But the 10% really, really love it. Now, actually, I've gotten almost exclusively positive feedback, but I think that it's probably one of the weirder segments that they have on that show. So I pretty much assume that if only 2 people are commenting, then the rest are like, oh my God, this guy again, fast forward.
So for people that don't know how that works for you, what's a good way that someone watching Token Punch Launch can support you?
Well, I mean, commenting is definitely an important thing there. And, just in general, talking about it, like talk about it on Twitter, on social media, that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm so critical of myself, like that. If there's one major flaw that I have as like a challenge to overcome day by day, is that I'm inherently a really self-critical person, and putting yourself out there into the world with a creative project, or in my case, like 10 creative projects all the time, distributing more and more and more, you start thinking like, oh God, everyone hates this, right? This is terrible, right? And of course, there are so many people who, will tell you, hey, I loved that episode, or I love this thing, and doors keep on opening, and people give you the response, and you love it. But there's always that demon on your shoulder going like, but what about the people who aren't saying anything?
Right.
And so I don't know, like, if people were complaining about it, they would have kicked me off by now. And when people do mention me, they mention it in a real positive light. So I think that, if people really dig it, if they really enjoy it, then just posting a comment somewhere, whether it's on one of our videos or whether it's on the Dice Tower itself. Or the best thing, the most validating thing to me, is if you started some beef. If you were like, no, that is absolutely the wrong record. Are you kidding me? The Police for Spirit Island? You are out your mind. Surely you need to listen to blah, 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 blah. And if you're doing that in a positive way, that's kind of in on the joke, then you will absolutely make my day. Because the truth is that it's completely subjective. It's preposterous to say this is the perfect soundtrack to listen to. Your preference of games is subjective. Your preference of music is subjective. I'm just trying to inform the world of why I think these work well together and work cohesively and what I want to listen to. But as long as people are listening to something and playing something, that's the coolest part. And talk about why you're into it or not into it.
Yeah, I think, and that goes back to the positivity you had, like you're talking about in the gaming community itself. Go on Twitter and pick, like, look up comics or look up movie trailers, and you've got all the trolls in the world that just want to tear you down. But you're right. Most of the gaming community, for the most part, is pretty positive, and I imagine probably the biggest trolls that you have to deal with are your own inner ones.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
But
I got a couple of those.
Yeah, I think we all do. One of the things that really stood out to me listening to you, listening to your podcast, and why the Cardboard Herald stood out to me amongst so many other ones, is that you seem to have kind of a natural, or maybe it's cultivated, like wonder and curiosity about you. So as opposed to like a lot of the gaming media, I guess
Mm-hmm.
you could call it, is it's all reviews. It's driving hype. Like what's the biggest, what's the best next, and then like a game's great for a month, and then it's the next great game, and then it's the next great game. But I don't get that sense when I listen to the Cardboard Herald. So going back to like that sense of wonder and curiosity, it seems like you just kind of slow down and go, I wonder what that's about.
Mm-hmm.
What was this guy thinking?
Right.
So is that something that you're purposefully cultivating?
Yeah. Okay. So I think there's a couple factors in here. Like a lot of it has come from my own feeling of displacement a lot in life. Mm-hmm. Like I wouldn't say like I'm a black sheep in my family. I'm loved by my family. I'm lucky to have a family that I'm close to. I'm really close to my dad and my brother and sister. Not as much with my brother in Germany, which I should be. But like I'm lucky for that. But I've always felt kind of out of place in my family because while they were into movies and music and that kind of stuff, it was definitely like Martin Scorsese movies, and it was definitely, the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and real straightforward kind of stuff. And I was always the kid who was into like really weird stuff. Come on, guys, let's just like orcs and goblins and elves, and this is so awesome. And Redwall, and have you guys read all these Narnia books? And like that was so totally not my family at all. And they tolerated it, and they in some ways encouraged it, but from like a perspective of, yeah, go do your thing, let your freak flag fly, just don't expect us to understand any of it. And I think that the problem with that is that it created a sort of sense of isolation and loneliness as a kid that I didn't necessarily have someone to really channel this energy towards. And so from a really young age, I remember establishing a lot of mentor type of relationships with adults around me, whether it was specific teachers or it was friends as parents or older siblings, or as I got into high school, like with other musicians who were older than me. And it always became a hunger for information, just wanting more and more and more and more. And this combined with a very, very specific moment. Like if I'm going to be honest about moments that change someone's life, and I doubt my brother even remembers this, but I think I was maybe in middle school, maybe even 6th grade. But I'm sitting there with my older brother, who's like 5 years older than me, and he's definitely a very, very staunch conservative guy these days. We're close, but at the time he was going through his like liberal punk rock phase in high school, and we were sitting there, and I remember watching the TV, and there was someone who was just doing something that was very, very excited and just showing off a lot of personality. It was really charismatic, and it was, a little bit silly. And I tell my brother, I'm like, man, that guy's such a fag. I'm saying that online because I'm admitting, that was my reaction. And my brother turned to me, and he was so pissed. And he was like, what does that matter? And I had this dawning realization of that a good older brother was like, check your assumptions about just everything in life, kid. All you're doing is trying to take someone down a peg and limit your exposure to something, whether he's gay or straight or, whatever it is, doesn't matter. What matters right now is how you're projecting on other people. You're trying to put other people down. This is for your own sense of self-worth because you don't have the self-esteem to tolerate things outside of your own bubble. And that moment had such a profound impact on me. And like I said, my brother probably doesn't even remember it at this point, but I think that was the moment where I started going like, man, I don't want to talk down about other people anymore. Like, I want to find out what makes everyone feel awesome, whether they are, really, really different than me in beliefs, whether they're the exact same as me in beliefs, they're of any race or of any culture. I just want to find out awesome things that make them excited. And I think that's a big part of where that sense of wonder came from.
Man, you just like really hit on a lot of notes that I just personally been thinking about lately. And this is going way off games, but there's that's all right.
That's the Cardboard Herald, man. You're feeling right. The host role right now.
This is like there's almost a danger in thinking about people as groups as opposed to people as individuals. And I'm not saying you shouldn't think of people as groups because that's reality. I guess the best way that I can summarize this, that I've been thinking about it lately, is like one of the highest levels of human experience is knowing someone and being known yourself. And, as opposed to taking you, like you said, make the assumptions and just making those calls on someone based on whatever my experience is, to actually take the time and say, hey, who are you? What makes you tick? What makes you want to design a game like this? Or what makes you want to start a podcast? Or why are you wanting to talk to people halfway around the world about cardboard?
Yep. Yeah.
But having that curiosity and wonder, I think, is a real like safeguard for us as individuals. I'm into it, man. That's a good conversation.
It's also a good example of the impact of actually intervening with something. Like it's so easy to witness something and then go online and say like, this is what I don't like, or I saw someone do something and you know what, I hate it when people do this, blah 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 blah, and some like self-affirming messages that go out online, and then people that agree with you in an echo chamber all go, yes, I totally agree with you. And like, someone's personal identity is so important to me. And I don't just mean that in the sense of strictly, equal rights for people of different color and race and sex and sexual orientation and all that kind of stuff. I mean, like, it really matters to me that someone can make choices in their life and feel like that choice is one thing, but only a part of their whole identity, and that someone should be judged holistically as part of their identity. There are, of course, crimes that people commit. There's atrocities that people are responsible for. But a person's right to be an individual and make complicated choices and be a self-contradiction in a lot of ways really matters to me. And lumping people into groups of Republicans and Democrats and liberals and conservatives and, racists, Nazis, and social justice warriors and Marxists and all this kind of stuff is just a way of reducing someone into these really, really unhelpful parts, and trying to eliminate the complexity of seeing someone as an individual, like you were saying. Like, when you get to know someone, and maybe, I don't know, maybe you hate Trump and you get to know someone and they voted for Trump, and you're like, oh my God, you are this type of person, until you start realizing like, no, we like the same movies. We've read a lot of the same books. We're into a lot of the same things. In fact, you showed me tons of cool music. And realizing that one aspect of someone's life is not the entirety of who that individual is really challenging. It's really hard. It is not convenient for you to be able to see your friends as multifaceted people. But I think it's really important. And I think that's the challenge that we have right now, is to see people that way. And getting back to what I was saying is that's that moment of my brother intervening and saying like, why are you even saying this? I didn't know why I was saying it. And thank God that my brother did, because it helped me to realize like the things that I say have meaning. I didn't even know if I thought about the word choice or the language or the connotations of anything I was saying. I think I was probably just trying to look cool in front of my older brother. And, you know, being able to have hard conversations and being able to look someone in the eye and be like, I love you, but also you are being a jerk right now, that's really tough. And it's also important. And I'm really glad that he did.
Yeah, that's like going back to that, you know, knowing and being known. And then like I listened to the episode you did with Jonathan Weaver today. And, you know, like that's even as we're known, you know, and I'm a Christian like he is. It's like knowing that experience of knowing and being known as a high level of human experience. It's even elevated beyond that. Like if you're known like for your brokenness and like all that stuff, and then you're still like loved and not rejected out of that, like that's like the pinnacle, you know?
Yeah, it's powerful stuff, dude.
Let's try to reel back into board games.
Let's try to get it back somewhere. Try to get somehow it back. There's a nugget of board gaminess in this.
So let me just go into a couple listener questions off that. So Halloween's coming up. What are some of the spookiest games that you've played and liked?
I've tackled some of this online before. Specifically, I did like a video series of like 3 spooktacular strategy games and horrific party games or something like that. I can't even remember the titles I was doing, but you know, off the top of my head, Mysterium is one that I really love. That one requires a group who's willing to buy into it. But I really love that game because, you know, if you have a group that is willing to be like, ooh, it's a ghost informing us and we're, you know, having to pick the right character and the item and everything, I'm all about that. If you have someone who's like, the mechanics of this game do not really facilitate exactly what I was looking for, you know, that person's going to drag down the game. It is all make or break based off of how willing people are to have a thematic experience. It's a very well done mechanical design, but still, if people aren't willing to kind of get immersed in it, then it just completely falls apart and it becomes really dry and boring.
It sounds like it would have good company with Nyctophobia then.
yeah, no kidding.
Because it's like the wrong group. That game's gonna bomb.
I'm excited to play that. Like you're in the middle of reviewing that actually for the Cardboard Herald right now, and I have read the review and I was like, man, what a bizarre sounding game. Not really sure if it's a great game, but how neat of an experience is that? So that's up there on my horror games to try. But
yeah.
Okay, so let me see if I can lightning around some of this. Definitely Mysterium. I'm a huge fan of Fury of Dracula, especially the most recent version. Even though it's I don't know, it's getting reprinted with a 4th edition or something now. But if you can find it, Fury of Dracula is really cool. And then some things like Letters from Whitechapel, Mr. Jack. I like Mr. Jack because it's really quirky, and I don't know that it's necessarily a great game, but it's an artifact from history, an early Bruno Catala design, and that in and of itself is worth looking into. Yeah, and I don't know, some of the Cthulhu stuff I'm a fan of. It's got the right vibe, but I don't know if it's necessarily Halloween-y. And then the thing that people always forget is Halloween shouldn't only be spooky. It can be fun. It can be parties, you know, anything that you could dress up as a costume, you know, there's all kinds of games out there. Play some Tolkien games. Play Hunt for the Ring and cosplay as some like Nazgul and hobbits. That's the right way to play that game.
Well, that sounds like a good Halloween party to be at.
Yeah, for sure. What about you? What are your faves?
Man, for Halloween, you know, like Fury of Dracula is actually one that I was going to ask you about. That was on my question if you'd played. So I haven't played it. I heard the 4th edition was coming out. I knew the 3rd edition is kind of tough to get. So I'd like to check that one out. But, you know, we've been playing Nyctophobia. I like the Salem game, which I also reviewed. Almost everyone in my house likes Zombicide Black Plague.
Oh, yeah?
So that is a great game. And we've played games that have been...
Wait, what's this almost everyone in my house? Who's the holdout here?
Probably the toddlers that haven't.
True.
They would like to play with the minis, but not the game.
Right.
So that's kind of been in a hiatus since I'm in the middle of painting them.
Are you like an expert paintsmith, a painter of miniatures, or is this like an early days experimentation type of thing?
Yeah, my early days experimentation was deciding to get some paint from Reaper, get some paint from Citadel, and just take on boxes and boxes of Zombicide. So
Yeah.
I think on the count I had was that I've got about 400 miniatures to paint.
Oh my god.
So
oh man.
it's slightly between Black Plague and Green Horde. That's slightly overwhelming.
Yeah, you picked a doozy to start with.
But it's a great game, so
Yep.
I totally recommend Black Plague. But what are some of your favorite house rules that you've come up with for board games?
Ooh, I don't know that we really play with a lot of house rules. Like, yeah, I'm not necessarily opposed to them, but we're pretty judicial when it comes to the rules. We're almost like bringing it back to labels. Conservative judges on the Supreme Court, where we're like, the game's constitution is not a living document. You do not modify that. And so I don't think that we necessarily play with a lot, but we do have a few like traditions or things that we make sure to do every time we play something. For example, like Camel Up is a game that we love. It's a game that we see a lot of play with, mainly because it's so versatile. It works well as like a 20-minute, hey, we're just banging out a quick game with some friends here. Well, maybe more than 20 minutes, but or it works good for like kids and parents, and it's adorable. But every time that we play, we name all the camels as though they were horses in a race.
That's
and
fun.
then we keep that on a sticky pad, and then we put the sticky pad on the inside of the box lid. And so we have probably like 24 or more sticky pads with all these names, and we start drawing on names from all kinds of past camels. And so like we have son of the Green Goblin, and then son of the Green Goblin, and like you have the heir to the Green Goblin's throne is all of a sudden a blue camel, in a game 15 games later or something like that. So we find ways of making rituals out of a lot of our games, even though we don't necessarily do a lot of house rules. I don't know. How about you?
Yeah, we don't usually do house rules either. I'm kind of like the rules lawyer
Yep.
for us. So I played Smash Up, and it was like, this is discard, this is destroy. I know they mean the same thing, but this is what it is, and here we go. We're going to go with it.
I think it comes from a history of playing CCGs so much. Like, I played a lot in the Legend of the Five Rings tournament scene, and it was so important to play things exactly as they were written, and sometimes that would work out unfavorably for you, or it would create situations that weren't necessarily intended by the designers or the people who were making certain cards or certain sets interacting in strange ways. But the only way to be consistent is to have rules that had some deliberation by the judge, and then you would end up from that tournament posting it onto the AEG rules forum and say, hey, this is a situation, this is how it was ruled for the tournament, just making sure that the AEG rules team endorses this, and then they'll come up with a ruling, and then it will be permanently affixed there, so that way if it ever comes up, it is always a resource for anyone in the middle of the game. And I think that was so drilled into my head that the idea of deferring from some rules is like preposterous to me. It's like, it is not what they supported.
Yeah, the hand axe there. I know nobody could see that, but that really drove that home.
I talk with my hands a lot.
One thing I've been thinking about lately, and the discussion on like the rules, that can be overburdensome for some people, and then or whether it's just a mountain of miniatures that need to be painted. Just kind of like this idea of having board game burnout.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Like, all right, I've got 10 games coming from Kickstarter and they're not here yet. And my shelf is already overflowing.
Dude,
So,
I know all about it.
like, I think this is a great hobby for all the reasons you said, the positivity and like the relationship building. That's all like a great aspect of this. Like, what are some things that you see, like behaviors at work that work against the enjoyment of the hobby?
You nailed it on the head with the whole board game burnout type of thing. And because our hobby, I hate the phrase cult of the new because it vilifies people who are excited about cool new stuff. I want people to be excited about cool new stuff. What I want to caution people against is you don't have to own all the cool new stuff. Like,
Yeah.
it's totally okay for you to enjoy the games that you like, be excited about new games, and maybe play them with your friends, or occasionally look at the best of the absolute best and get them for yourselves. And we all fall victim to this sometimes. I know that I certainly do, where there's like a game and I feel like I have to have it, and then I get it and I'm like, oh man, I got like 10 other things to play, and I look at the box and there's so many rules and components. I'm like, that's like 2 evenings in and of itself just to figure out what's going on with this game. And then there's some remorse there, and then you start feeling bad about the purchase, and then you're like, man, what am I even doing with playing these games? Fear of missing out is really something that I think is poisonous to this hobby. And I think that it preys on that behavior that we were just talking about, that is, you know, the overexcitement and overindulgence in the new stuff, because so much of the current state of board games is caught up in Kickstarter and exclusivity. I don't know my words. I will allow either of those. My judging is, you know, my board game judge podcaster mind is going to say that either of those words are totally acceptable in this situation, and you can at me on Twitter if you got problems with it. But the fear of missing out is a huge thing, because a lot of people want the best. They don't want to feel like they missed out on certain promos or certain deluxe copies of a game, or the game itself, because there's no guarantee that a game's going to be available after Kickstarter is done, or after the initial print run, even if it's not a Kickstarter is done. Right. And companies, particularly really well-established companies, like I'll call out Cool Mini or not, often prey on that feeling that if I don't hop on it now, then when's my chance going to come? What if I don't get it? What if I don't have access to it? I mean, I'm even feeling that right now. Like, I deliberately tried to resist backing a lot of Kickstarters, mainly because it can get into some weird conflict of interest territories and that kind of stuff. But like Root is a game right now that we're recording that is really popular. It has a lot of cool visuals. Some reviews have been kind of mediocre on it, but the reviews that I've seen have demonstrated to me that it's the type of game that I think that I would like. And because it's not really widely available, I'm like, oh man, I wish that I had backed the Kickstarter, and that would have been so cool. And now I'm like looking at Amazon like, do they have Root in yet? Do they have Root in yet? Should I get Root? When, if it were available right now, I don't know that I would buy it. Like, if it were just widely distributed, I don't know that I would buy it. I think the thing that's driving the feeling that I have right now is that somehow I'm on the outside of all this fun time that people are having, and I'm trying to remedy that by buying something or wishing that I had something. And right. I'm not saying Leader Games preys on this, but there are many, many, many companies that specifically target people with stretch goals and with Kickstarter exclusive stuff that they want you to feel like if you don't get it now, then chances are you're not going to get it later, whether that's true or not. And I think that ends up with a lot of people having these big, giant mega games in their collection that they're like, when am I ever going to play this? I don't even want to learn how to play it, even though it sounds so cool. It's in my hands now, and it's just so much work. And I hear about that time and time again, and I see it time and time again with friends, and I've even witnessed it with myself, with games sitting around not getting played, and it's like, man, what in me was so compelled to get this at the time that now that it's here, why don't I have that same enthusiasm in actually playing it? And other than that, as positive as this hobby can be, I think that's mainly the vocal majority that's online and the vocal majority that participates in these various media outlets and everything. But there are some issues that still exist that do bring me down a little bit, especially in like public meetups and that kind of stuff. Certain behaviors that are like, for example, assuming that the woman who sits down at the table with you isn't going to really understand how to play the game. And so you will see men naturally flock to them, probably well-meaning, but essentially taking their turn for them and saying, oh, you can do this. Oh, did you know you could do this? Oh, why don't you actually do this? Because this is what you should do. When they're not doing that to their male counterparts. And even making it a novelty that a woman would be interested in, like a deep strategy game. It is something that I think we can honestly say that not as many women are vocally into these big, deep strategy games. They want to play this Twilight Imperium 4, but there are some, and what's not going to help the situation of balancing that gender inequality is if a woman is playing it to act like, oh, whoa, a woman playing this? Whoa, that's crazy. Okay, what a weirdo. I mean, that's cool. I'm totally in support of this, but, that's really strange. Making it this situation that's a novelty and weird puts a lot of pressure on people and unwarranted attention instead of just being chill. This is just another player at the table. So those are some of the things that kind of sometimes leave a sour taste in my mouth or make me feel a little bit fatigued. Getting too many review copies of some stuff and putting too many time constraints on yourself is a good way of starting to resent all of your choices in life. Maybe that's just where I was for like the majority of August and beginning of September, but now I'm starting to feel a lot better. Got a lot of that taken care of, and now I'm on my way to do other bigger, better things, and got a lot of those deadlines taken care of.
So you've had a bigger focus on independent creators lately. What's kind of been driving that?
Well, there's a couple of things. So if I'm being honest, the main reason is that I'm in a fortunate position where people are more often coming to me and saying, hey, I have this project and it would be great if I could help, if the Cardboard Herald could help promote it. And that is convenient. So I definitely am having access to a lot more independent creators, but also some of it is purposeful because I realize that I often have more authentic conversations with the people who haven't been doing this forever, who haven't had the kind of exposure to a million different media outlets that are far bigger and far more diverse than the Cardboard Herald. Like I like talking to the people who don't often go on podcasts, and sometimes that's really important and notable people, at least to me. Like I would say Roberto Demeglio, who's the founder of Ares Games, and he was the co-designer of War of the Ring. I don't think he's been on a lot of podcasts, and I don't know how often sought out he is, or at least English-speaking podcasts, but having a really great conversation with him because there's not the expectation of, oh, it's just going to be the same old questions that everyone's asked me, that type of thing. Even though I try not to ask the same questions that everyone else would, it's still the moment that you say, hey, do you want to come on my podcast? That person's going to expect something out of you if they've been on 15, 20, 30 other podcasts throughout their career. So that's a lot of it. And then the other aspect is I'm starting to build a lot more relationships with people, people that I really like, people that I enjoy spending time with, that I'd like to spend time with. Whether it's Carla Kopp or Jonathan Weaver or Jackson Pope, these are people who, after the interview, we hang out and talk for a while, and we talk about all kinds of other things, and they seem like people that I'd like to game with or to hang out with, period. And I think building that sort of relationship is easier when it's not someone who has a million demands for their time and they're very well established. And so I think that I've, to a degree, sought out some of that. I don't know. I don't know if it's entirely been conscious. Maybe I'm just making up excuses for how it's happened.
No, I've liked it. I think those conversations they've been more, like you said, authentic. It's not, you're not getting like hype-driven PR. It's not, this is like, this is the press package of what I'm going to say for this game.
Right,
and
right.
It's not the script. It's, you're getting Carla, you're getting Jonathan. And then the other question I had that came out of board game burnout is, and this is going to be specifically game related, to put you on the spot. So if you had to cull your collection down to 5 games that you would want most to play, what would you cull it down to?
Okay. So I think about this a lot because I have this dream of either living on a boat or moving to a different country or something. And my uncle, who was a big influence on me, he gave me The Hobbit at 3 years old. Or rather, he showed me the VHS of The Hobbit at 3 years old on his houseboat. He had a rule of he doesn't own more than 100 things. And, I mean, he owned the VHS of The Hobbit. So that was 1% of his entire ownership of everything in life. But there are some games that I would cull it down to. So give me some parameters here really quick, just so I know exactly what I'm dealing with. Is this the only 5 games that I'm ever going to own? Or is this current collection and this is just for like the next year or something?
Let's do it like if there's a fire in your house, your family, your animals, your photo albums, all that stuff are safe, and you've got time for 5 games.
Okay,
what's coming out with you?
I guess I shouldn't split hairs on this. I should just commit and say these are the 5 games that I would like to own, which is different than my 5 favorite games. I mean, because 5 favorite games, you may not get some use out of them. But if they are the 5 games that you're going to own, presumably for a long period of time, and you're not going to have access to other ones, you want games that you can play. Whether that's by yourself or 2-player, because my primary gaming buddy is my wife, or it's a game that I think is just easier to fit in some games with. So I'm going to go with definitely Terraforming Mars, then Spirit Island, maybe Archipelago. As much as I like Archipelago, it might get the cut here because Terraforming Mars and Spirit Island give me so much of what Archipelago does. I think that I would also include, man, I'm a sucker for Dexterity and Catacombs and the whole vibe and the whole look of that game. So Catacombs is going to be in there. There's just so much game in there, and it's so different than everything else. So we got 3 games. We got Terraforming Mars, we got Spirit Island, we got Catacombs. I'm saying it right now, Archipelago, I'm sorry, don't hold it against me, but you're not making the cut.
I'll even give you the expansions all fit in the box. All 400 of your minis go in one box.
Okay.
And it can come out.
Okay, we're going to fit it all in one box. Oh, Scythe, you are so close, especially with all of the Rise of Fenris stuff here, has given you lots of new ways to play, so maybe I'm going to have that in there. But, I have my co-op, I need a small game. I don't have a small game in here. What small game am I going to most often play? Man, Tiny Epic Defenders is honestly something that might make the cut, which is very strange, and I feel kind of shady for saying it, and I don't know why I feel shady for saying it, like I'm forgoing all these other games in my collection, but it's repeatable, it has emotional significance to me, and it's a game that I really enjoy, and the second edition is really nice. Oh man, there are so many ways that I'm going to kick my own butt for answering with these particular 5 down the road, but I'm going to say that it is Terraforming Mars, Spirit Island, Catacombs, Scythe, and Tiny Epic Defenders. And I also feel really gross that almost all of those games have come out in the last 2 years. Okay, I need to rethink life.
That's all right. I was thinking about my own list, like what would I put on this? And then I realized like these are games that I would want to play most and I like, but I don't have the plays in on them. Mm-hmm. So for the most part,
Suburbia has to make the cut. My wife would kill me if I didn't include Suburbia, and I love Suburbia. And that's also an older game. I might say Scythe doesn't make the cut. Oh, that feels horrible to say.
Jamie, I'm sorry.
Oh, Jamie. I love Scythe. It's almost there if I had room, but the box is so big. I couldn't carry it out of the building on my own, even if I was trying to fireman carry it out the door.
Well, you would be able to live in it if your house didn't survive.
That's true. That legendary box would give me some options.
All right. Well, I'm sorry, Jamie. That's a good list, though. So I did like Spirit Island. So we played it. I got it a few months ago. We've played it a couple times now. We actually won our first game.
Oh, exciting!
I was surprised by, and then we were completely obliterated on our second game. So I was like, oh, okay, this is more like Robinson Crusoe now.
Yep,
Which that's fine. I love Robinson Crusoe. Like that feeling of this game is going to destroy me.
Right.
Or like the Grizzled, like I didn't know a game could make me feel that bad, and I like that.
Yeah,
it's just.
Oh man, now you're saying the Grizzled. No, it wouldn't make the top 5 but it's so good.
It is.
Oh man,
that's a good one. Let's move away from board games for a second. Mm-hmm. So, 2 last questions. So you like games, you like vinyl. Do you have any like other analog things that like you really like writing with fountain pens, or you've got your specific papers that you like, or like those kind of tactile, deep sensory, this is really satisfying and savory to do.
Right. Okay. So there's a few of those. And so I am someone who, of course, likes vinyl. I like board games. My preferred method of transportation, if I'm being completely honest, is bicycles. I am very much an avid cyclist. I drive now typically to work, though sometimes I'll bike commute when it's not raining here in the rainforest. And then there are a couple other things. I very much enjoy archery. I love archery more than I like rifle shooting, and I do archery typically with recurve bows, and when I use a compound bow, I use a wooden compound bow. It's an antique that my grandfather owned, and there are much more higher tech things, and that is fine for other people. I will stick with my ancient, gorgeous, carved wooden compound bow. There are a couple other things, too, that remind me of home and remind me of my dad. This is going to be awful because I hate... No. I should take ownership of certain things. For those in the audience that don't know, I don't drink. I don't do any drugs. I don't smoke cigarettes. But I have an extreme emotional connection to pipe tobacco. Because I grew up with it. My dad smoked, and I was talking about my friend Peter dying. After he died. This is probably like someone's descent into madness. This is not an excuse, but I needed, especially because I moved to an isolated city that was away from my family, I needed some way of feeling like I was back to being a kid again, and that emotional connection of smelling the pipe tobacco was very powerful and important to me. And so I occasionally, like maybe once a month or so, will smoke pipe tobacco, and I'll go on a walk or I'll take my dog out. It's very rare, but I have an old pipe that my dad got hand carved in Italy, a Rikichi pipe. He had never even used it. He has tons upon tons of pipes. He never used it. He gave that to me. And so I use a Zippo, and I, use a pipe to smoke pipe tobacco, and the ritual of that is one of the very few rituals that I have that's particularly unhealthy for me, but is like an indulgence that really connects me with something that is important to my history. And I'm not really quite sure how, but that's another example of something that I do that's analog and old school.
Yeah, that sounds good, man. I'm just like, I was big into pipes for a little bit. I still have my stuff. I haven't used them in a while, but I'm having these visions of like, all right, let's get together, let's play Spirit Island, let's sit in big like tall back chairs and smoke a pipe, and like this is sounding like a good time.
Man, forget that. Let's go out camping. Let's sit at the top of a waterfall with our legs dangling down on either side of it and just kind of chill in the environment there, listening to all the sounds and just letting things happen and just kind of zone out in an almost meditative state of this moment and sensory overload between the taste and smell of the tobacco mixing with the environment, the water, the mist shooting up, and oh man, when I'm getting really stressed out, that is one good way for me to just release.
Yeah, like you mentioned Narnia earlier. Like I think it was C.S. Lewis that talked about quiddity, like the thisness of the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's like, like you can't. I mean, we would take a picture of it, and okay, I can look at it, but like you lose the moment in that picture.
Right, right.
That sounds like a great time. And we didn't touch on this too much, so I got to ask one last question. With someone who is still alive, what would your dream concert be, and where would it be?
Oh, with someone who's still alive.
Still alive.
Okay. So I've talked a few times before about how Red Hot Chili Peppers made a big impact on me, and I got a chance to see them. They came to Anchorage, and it is the only concert that I've ever flown to go see. And that was, because I moved to Juneau, which is isolated from our largest city of Anchorage, even though Juneau is our capital. And I had already moved away from Anchorage. And I'm like, what? Chili Peppers are coming to... Oh, man. So I went and saw them. But as much as I'd like to see them again in a more proper venue, Klinghoffer is okay, but he's no Frusciante. And so the current state of the band is okay. But I would say that if I'm being absolutely honest to myself, of artists that are still living, while the Rolling Stones are really tempting, while Paul McCartney is very tempting, my heart of hearts, the most comprehensive part of me, would love to see Metallica, probably somewhere like the San Francisco Bay Area, where where they're the hometown heroes from, or something like that. Or see them in Antarctica, because they played in Antarctica, so that would be pretty awesome too. But they were a huge important influence on me as I was learning to play guitar. They were kind of my introduction into heavy metal music. They are still something that I go back to. I love pretty much all eras of Metallica. I've even talked on the podcast about how I kind of actually really like Saint Anger, and that's a shameful thing for a lot of music-loving people to say. But there it is, and I think if I could have my perfect concert, it would be Jason Isbell and the 400 unit opening up for Metallica. I have no idea how that's going to happen, but they'd make it work out, and it would be in some concert hall, not a stadium, in San Francisco Bay.
That would be a great concert.
Yeah, no kidding.
We'll have to at Jason Isbell, because after your Rookin' record, I got the Nashville sound. So
there you go.
So I mean, it did go with Scythe, which is coming out of my burning house.
Yep.
So, well, Jack, man, it's been a great night to sit and talk with you.
Yeah, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you doing this. And I know that we've communicated off and on as interested people in board games, and now you've written some awesome stuff for us, and you got more stuff on the horizon, and you're doing all your stuff. it just seemed like the right fit, because every time we talked, I feel like, oh man, that dude thinks about things. I want to talk to that dude more. And so this has been a real pleasure. And the same goes for just in general for the audience out there. This is 100 episodes, and there are times when I probably sound really tired on the podcast, or I'm like, oh man, am I going to make it through this night because I got like 5 other things to do, Cardboard Herald related. But I'm consistently amazed by how many awesome people are out there, and it's been an absolute privilege to be able to give a platform to so many awesome people through interviews, through reviewing their things, to showcasing their stuff, and just to be able to talk to awesome people. And so as much as I'm honored to talk with you, I'm honored to just be here in the first place.
Cool, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on the Cardboard Hill today.
Thanks. I hope I get to come back sometime.
Yeah, I hope so. That'd be real nice.
Thank you for listening to the Cardboard Herald. As always, everything we do is ad-free and audience-supported. If you'd like to help keep it that way, find the Patreon link at the top of our webpage, cardboardherald.com. We have several levels to support with various rewards. If you enjoyed the show, we do a whole bunch of other stuff, including reviews, interviews, and recommendations across writing, podcasts, and video. You can find that on our YouTube channel or by visiting any of our social media or our website. So with that out of the way, thank you again for listening to the Cardboard Herald. Before I answer this, let me take care of these insane sounding dogs because I have no idea what's going on right now. I will be right back.
Yeah, man. You were listening to Jack Eddy's dogs.
Okay. You stay in here with me. No more barking at little girls selling raffle tickets.